Welcome to Raging Bullets, a DC Comics fan podcast, episode 480. The road to 500 begins. Welcome to Raging Bullets. I'm Sean Whalen, drnorge. I'm joined as always by my co-host Jim, the sensei of the Whatnot Segulin, the Duke of the elder statesman of the podcast.
How's it going, eh?
On this episode, Jim and I are going to be talking about Supergirl number 3, Teen Titans number 1, Cyborg number 5, and Mother Panic number 1. This actually is the first of a kickoff to our road to episode 500, which we're going to make that air March 23rd. This is nice because Jim and I have been talking a lot recently about how do we get the show back on a 4-a-month schedule. And we have to in order to hit 500 by our anniversary. So this is going to be the first episode. You notice we came back a little bit sooner with this one than we did our previous one. We come up with some clever ways to start recording 2 episodes at a time and some different options like that to try and make sure that we hit 500 on time. We actually have to release more than 4 a month. We have to release, in 2 of the months, we're going to have to release an extra episode somewhere in there in order to make that work. But we're committed to making sure by March 23rd we hit episode 500 because that'll be our anniversary for 11 years of doing the podcast. And it's kind of cool to have our 500th episode line up to that particular anniversary. So we're going to do everything in our power to try and make that happen. Woohoo! We are proud members of the Comics Podcast Network, the League of Comic Book Podcasts, and the InfiniteComics.com podcast partnership. Jim, we are sponsored this episode by DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com. What is going on over at DCBService.com?
Well, one, they always have the bundles, and the bundles are wonderful. 50% off. You can go with the various, rebirth issues. They got their Vertigo. They've got the Young Animals. They've got 45% off the variant covers. They're doing the mini-series bundles, also at 50% off. So you get the great deals, but they have something else that I want to talk about. They are running Absolute Preacher hardcover volume 1 as well as volume 2. Each one of these 50% off, only $75 for each of the 2 different volumes. And obviously with the recent passing of Steve Dillon, who was the artist on the Preacher, I think this is very appropriate to bring it that they're doing this, and I'm very happy they are, because if you haven't picked up Preacher, right here is a great way to get the hardcover Absolute volumes 1 and 2, 50% off. Thank you, DCBS.
Do you have Absolute Preacher number 1?
Yes, I have both of those. I actually already had those, but it was kind of a neat thing when I saw it. I'm like, hey, we got to mention this in case somebody doesn't have the the hardcover, the Absolutes, because it's a great way to read them.
Is 2 out?
Yeah,
because I don't have 2. So I'll definitely be taking advantage of the deal to get Absolute Preacher number 2. But I have 1, and it's a gorgeous volume. I read it already, actually. It's a great volume. So for me, that deal is right up the alley, because I do not have Absolute Preacher volume 2. But speaking of deals, if you look over at InStockTrades.com, they have a DC deal running right now of up to 75% off select titles. And there's other titles that are in that list that they've put back up to the 50% off discount. So just for an example, I've just clicked on the ad, and they've got the Aaron and Ahmed hardcover from Vertigo. This is a $24.99 hardcover. It's 70% off, only $7.49. Speaking of Absolute Editions, they have Absolute Identity Crisis, the hardcover. That's 50% off now. That's also $49.99. But then there's like the recent Absolute Adventures of Supergirl trade paperback. It's 50% off. They have Air, the various trade paperbacks from that Air series from Vertigo, which is sweet. It's by G. Willow Wilson and M.K. Perker on art. Those are $14.99 trade paperbacks. They're 70% off, only $4.49. So you can buy 3 of them for the price of 1. I mean, that's crazy nuts. If you like the archive editions, All-Star Comics Archive, volumes 7 and 9 I'm looking at right now. These are $49.95 books. They're $14.98. I mean, it's just crazy discounts you can get over at InStockTrades.com. Go and grab this because these are limited time deals. Obviously, it has to do with how much stock they have. They're trying to clear out excess stock. So take advantage of this and get some of these amazing deals for yourself. I want to thank DCB Service and InStockTrades.com, though, for continuing to support our shows. Remember that DCBService.com is a digital partner. Whether you do Comixology or My Digital Comics, make sure to link your accounts and shop through their portal. It doesn't cost you anything more, but what it does do is you start to accumulate a credit in your DCBService.com account for the digital purchases you're already making, and it does help our sponsor. So please consider helping out our show sponsor with that. James, what kind of a podcast are we?
Raging Bullets is a spoiler podcast. We go in depth into plotline, story twists, and whatnot of the comics we're discussing on today's show. So, if you have read the books, you may want to come back later so you can better enjoy the show.
Let's talk some comics.
There they are, all alone except for that old character.
Our first issue that we're going to talk about on this episode is going to be Mother Panic issue number 1. The writer is Jody Houser. The illustrator is Tommy Lee Edwards. The letterer is John Workman. The editor is Molly Mahan. Special thanks to Shelley Bond. DC's Young Animal, curated by Gerard Way. Mother Panic, created by Gerard Way, Jody Houser, and Tommy Lee Edwards. And apologies for any name butchery. I really wanted to talk about this title because obviously, you know, when it's a Gotham one, you got me hooked in because of the fact that it's Gotham we're talking about. But this one in particular is interesting because at first, in my first read-through, I didn't like her. and my second read-through, I think I got a chance to spend a little bit more time understanding her and her background story. Because you don't really understand in like the first couple pages that this is our lead, and she's certainly not very likable in the first couple pages, and I think that maintains throughout the book. Here's what I found, though. In my second read-through, I found that compelling. I found it interesting that she's not this immediately likable person, and I do think it's going to be a few issues. I'm interested in her backstory. I want to know what happened to her dad. I want to know more about his relationship with her mom. I want to know more about her relationship with both of them. Things have happened in her history. Like, there's the mystery of the dad's death, right? I want to know what's going on there. I want to know more about what her motivations are for what she's doing, because she's not motivated the same way Batman is, which that's where I'm starting to get compelled. This is a character, a vigilante, who really is operating in Gotham as a true blue vigilante. Batman, a lot of times you give a pass to because what he's doing is intrinsically good, right? He's trying to prevent people from going through what he did. But with Mother Panic, that is not the case. At least it doesn't seem that way on the surface. And what I found in my first read-through was a detractor. In my second read-through was incredibly interesting to me. That was my take on it, though. It really was the second read-through I needed to go, I really want to read issue 2 now. Whereas I don't know that I felt that way in the first read-through. Where are you at on this book? Because it was an interesting journey for me on this one. I really do like it now, and we'll talk more about why as we get through.
Yeah, I'm actually in a really good spot with this book, and it's for me, the first read through was kind of groovy, but then it's one of those where first read through, hey, this is a pretty cool story. It's kind of interesting that it takes place in Gotham, that it's current state, etc. It's current continuity and all that. But again, as you said, second read through, you start looking for more of the nuances. You start looking for a little bit more of the detail in it, and I think at the end of the book, they have those brief summaries and synopses of the different people from the Young Animals. Reading the Mother Panic synopsis kind of information card on her was kind of interesting, because that actually helped me along with my understanding of who she is and where she's going and why she's there.
And I agree with you. I think that was it for me, too. In my first read-through, I hadn't had a chance to read that information and wrap my head around her. So in the first issue, there was enough in the first issue to get me to buy issue 2. But I really felt like I was relying on those little pieces to get me interested in issue 2 until I read it the second time through. And then I was like, oh, wow. Violet Page is actually really interesting. Her backstory is just as compelling to me as to what she's doing in the costume. And that's where I think they've hooked me. I've got a lot of questions about her family. I've got a lot of questions about the background that's driving a lot of her. Why is she doing this? Like, what made her get in this costume? We don't know that as of the first issue as far as what's happening actually in the comic. That part to me is interesting when you get to kind of go on this journey and really get to know a lot about this character from, like, in real time. We don't know anything more than any of the other people in her world does. I like that. I actually felt like when Batman showed up on the scene, I was following the same mystery he was. I always like that. That hooked me, like, right from the get-go. I'm like, Batman's on the scene, wants to know more about this girl, and she's flying away on her little vehicle. Well, the vehicle's cool. That flying, I don't know what you'd call that. I guess hovercraft. Glider. Yeah, you're right. That was really cool. And then I did love this cameo when Batman showed up on the scene, because I always thought these Young Animal books were like in their own continuity. Just because of, I think, the way that they've been introduced, they're not beholden to, it seems like they're not beholden to sticking to DC continuity. I would be fine if they're all in continuity, but they don't seem to be beholden to that. This was the first one where I'm like, wait, this is actually, I think, in continuity, and I actually quite like that.
Well, and it's one of the interesting things for me on this, because you mentioned Batman, was second read through, I'm looking at the party that she's attending, and I'm trying to spot him there, because he's got to be in either disguise or hidden in the shadows or doing something there. Same type of investigation she's dealing with. Because one, I say he got on the scene way too quickly not to be already in the middle of this investigation. So they're both handling the same investigation. And I like the fact that, and that was something that, again, as I said, second read through, I'm looking for Bruce. And I think that is kind of a neat thing to do with this. And with her as a person, because there was stuff that you notice, she's got that debut, that, those celebrity, they're famous because they're famous, type of people who that can be annoying at times. And she gives off that air and that vibe that's what she's really about. But it's, there's something different about her. Now we know there's something different. The rest of the world doesn't know that yet. So it's kind of like, I'm wondering if she inflates that image the way Bruce inflates the $1 million Playboy, or is that part of her deal? Is it not what she is? This, those are the kind of mysteries and the questions that are raised in my head, and those are the stuff that I want further information on. So it's kind of neat that just this one issue started me thinking already. Well, what about this? How does she do this? Does she actually think about a secret identity, or is it just? What is this? Just her group?
Now, here's my question to you on that one. You were talking before about how Batman arrived on the scene because he was investigating the same thing she is. See, I see that too. First of all, I think you could be very well right on that one, so this isn't disputing that. But there is another possibility that. Was he on the scene because he was investigating her? That's the part that I want to know more about. Like, what is his motivation for being there? Is it A or is it B? I think you could very well be correct, so that wasn't really more. But there is another piece to the puzzle. He may have already been on the trail of her. Other thing in the beginning of this one, when the issue kicks open, and I noticed this in my second read-through, I think in the second read-through, I started getting a lot more interested in this title and in the character. So I started reading more. I know that's kind of a strange thing to say, but you know how you do that when you start getting engrossed in something and you want answers? You go back, and the way that you're paying attention to dialogue is just different. You're paying attention to every word. She went through major surgery. She's getting drugs right now, and I don't know if she's part of the drug culture. I'm kind of getting there's that kind of vibe going on, but she went through some major surgery. So is the drugs part of pain she's going through with that? What caused the major surgery? Was she in some sort of accident? Was there? Does it have something to do with when she's in costume? Is there something special about her because of it or not? I don't know. It was something that I don't think's a throwaway. Like that major surgery piece, I want to know more about it, and I don't feel like I do as after the first issue. And I am finding like little bits and pieces like that it's different than the synopsis, right? Where you start seeing this stuff play out and you want to know more of the fleshed out story and what's happening with this girl. And I do find that was the thing in the second read through that I was enjoying. I think I paid attention more. and it was one of those things where I think it happens to me quite often with new characters and new environments, where the first time through I'm in kind of like sensory overload because everything's new, so I don't have a common frame of reference other than Gotham in this case. But I don't feel like that was enough to give me that, which is normal. And in my second read-through, I felt like, wow, okay, I got my overview of this in the first read-through. In my second read-through, I'm really paying attention, and I'm finding a lot more that's pulling me into issue 2. So they hooked me the first read-through, but the second time through, I started noticing a lot of questions I have about her. I want to know why she's got this chip on her shoulder. I know a lot of it has to do with her family, but it's also, you're right, she's in this kind of celebrity world where at the party, she's very snooty about certain people. Like the one person she walked by, I'm guessing at one point they were friends, she goes, so she's still mad, or, that type of thing. It wasn't in the sense that she was sad about that. It was kind of like she was assuming she would and should be. So I want to know more about what's going on with that. You're right. It very much is contemporary in that it matches a lot of our celebrity culture today. And that was something that really struck me the second time through. I'm like, this is very much you're keeping up with the Kardashians kind of meets Batman culture that feels very organic and contemporary to Batman today. And it would be a world that would crisscross with Gotham, with the high money that comes through Gotham. There's big parties that are going on there. She would be a part of this world. So I'm finding a lot to like about this in my second read-through. And I love the art.
Oh, yeah. It's funny because, one of the things that part of the thought that was going through my head is she utilizing this paparazzi lifestyle, to cover a secret identity, or if that's just her. And I think that for me was one of the cool things that I'm trying to figure out, because I think you mentioned where she talks about the one former friend, and then dealing with the one reporter that wants to ask questions about her father, and just you see the flare-ups, and that's kind of sort of natural. But the one scene that I liked that I didn't catch it until second and third read through was when she's first getting off the plane. You got the two girls there that are set up a selfie, and they have it set so that when she walks by, they'll take a picture with the two of them and her in the picture. Well, when you look at that picture, she sees what they're doing, turns and kind of gives them a little smile. So she's aware of the surroundings. She's aware that there's some fans doing that kind of stuff. And for me, it looks like she's actually saying, hey, how's it going, eh? Kind of, pleasantries. And then immediately after that, she's flipping off the other people. So it's kind of like she's playing the game to me. And maybe I'm reading more into those two couple panels, but that looks like she's playing the game. This is just an act for her. This is the $1 million Playboy act that Bruce Wayne does.
On this piece, hang on a second, though. You got to remember that the two different reactions were very different. These were two girls that were taking a selfie that were like in awe that they saw her. So they're both, it was more pleasant. The person in the crowd was heckling her.
Right.
Care to comment about the fact? So that the flip off came from the fact that she's being heckled.
Right, but that's what I'm saying. It's not like
I don't think she's playing a game. I think what we're seeing is who she is in her street clothes, and I don't know that for her it really is a game. I think that she does have this hidden life as Mother Panic. But I do think that's her world that she's in. And I think what's interesting to me is how she got there. And that's the secret. I think we're saying the same thing. The secret to her is how she got to be this person. What led her to be this person that she is. And I'm intrigued by that.
Yeah, the secret of who she is and why she's there, et cetera, that is a huge part of the story, for me. And I think also, and we're kind of saying the same thing, but we're saying maybe a little different. I don't know. But one of the things about her, I am still curious, who is the real her? Mm-hmm. Because how we always talk about with Batman, there's multiple faces of Batman, but you get the real Batman when you see him, having conversations with Alfred in the cave. That's the real Bruce, that comes out. I want to know who is the real her, who is the real Violet, and I think that's something that, the fact that just in one issue, I'm already thinking, what kind of person are we dealing with? Is this a multiple face, kind of, where is this going to be one of those characters where we question who is the real person, in or out of the costume? And I think that for me is going to be the big part of as we start learning more about her, we start seeing who she is. So I'm very excited and interested in learning who is the real Violet. Is she this paparazzi-driven Flash, celeb reality? Is she a vigilante? Is she something completely different? It's what makes her tick, and I think that is after one issue. If I'm starting to think that deep about her, they did a good job with the introduction. Yeah,
I would agree with you on that one, and that was, I think, to your point. I think we are seeing it very similarly. Maybe our assumptions about her are different. But I think what's drawing us in is the same thing. It's the fact that as you get to know more about her and you read more about her and start wrapping your head around her, what's compelling is trying to figure out who she is. Because I did go from not liking her to being interested in her. I still don't know that I like her. And I actually don't think that that's a problem. There's a lot of characters that I love reading that I don't know that I would ever really like, per se. What's interesting to her to me is that her story's compelling. And I do want to know more about it. And that part's fun for me. I will say that right now I'm not really sure that I do like her. But I do want to follow her. it's it's like you want to follow a train wreck, and I'm pulled in on that level where it's like, you can give me this monthly, I will follow this because I want to know more about what's going on with this girl. I do think it's going to shift though, and here's what I think is going to shift. When you start reading, I flip through the next page and you start seeing back at the very beginning, and you see stories of her interacting with her dad and her mom going through that. My grandmother had Alzheimer's and passed away from Alzheimer's. So much of what's going on with her mother reminded me of what that was like with my grandmother. There's times where they go back in their childlike. There's other times where they say things that you're like, it's a little scary. I mean, just in the sense because you're scared for them. You remember this person when they were so with it and so sharp and, together. And then you see these points where they're saying things that are so out there that you feel sad for them and almost scared for yourself. Like, hey, am I going to go through that at some point in time in my life? Those type of things. And it really connected with how well written that was. Because I think when you have a family member that goes through that, you go through all kinds of emotions. Some of them are very personal, and, to a certain extent selfish for yourself. Others of them are being scared and fearful for that person. And others are just downright endearing. Like, there's sequences in here where the mom's singing that I'm like, yes, that's exactly what it's like. Because they go into that, childlike phase where you can't help but smile and enjoy that moment with them. I think in the single issue, they showcased what the mother's going through. I think there's more to that story, too. But they showcased what the mother's going through, I think, in a way that really showed all of those stages and all of those angles and layers very well. And it's hard to do that in a first issue. I always found the mother incredibly compelling. And the dad's story is compelling to me, too. All of those are puzzle pieces that drive my interest in Mother Panic. So they're doing a really good job of crafting a world here that took me from not knowing who any of these people are to being deeply invested, which is funny. In my first read-through, I was like, I don't like her. And it's funny how in the second read-through, I can say I'm in an incredibly different place as far as I just want to know. I want to know more. It's become a mystery that's really hooked me in very fast. Because she's not our traditional good guy vigilante. I don't think her throwaway lines are disingenuous. That doesn't mean that she won't change. And I think knowing her motivations are going to help us understand why she's behaving the way that she is. But she's not Batman, not out of the starting gate. She could become that character. And here's the thing to me, I'm far more interested in her journey because of the fact that she's not. There's something interesting about that.
She's got the pointy ear thing going for her, so she could go that way.
She reminds me, though. I know I'm chuckling as you're saying it. She reminds me of what I've enjoyed about Azrael. Azrael was unique. He didn't follow the same path that Batman does because of the San Dumas thing, the fact that he had the system inside him. There were times where Azrael wasn't your traditional good guy. He was this guy, though. Jean Paul Valley was this guy who was striving to be that, trying to be that good person. And it was interesting to see somebody go on that journey when they are this angel of vengeance inside them. It's kind of like what the duality is of the Spectre, if that makes sense. Right. This is nice because it's a unique take. It's a different sort of character that has that same sort of interesting quality. They don't fall into the typical mold. And especially setting her in Gotham, where Batman does not play nice with people that don't fall into the typical mold, because Batman's got a mold that he expects his vigilantes to. If you're going to operate in his city, you better toe the party line. That part is really, to me, what I'm finding interesting about this. I can totally see why. That's why I'm asking, was he investigating what she was? Or is he investigating her? Because there's reasons why he would.
I'm still thinking he was investigating the same thing that she was. I don't think Bat's on to her yet. Or maybe. If he is, because I don't think she's been that active. I think this is one of the first occurrences and introductions of her to Gotham society. Because you think about it, Gotham pretty much knows their heroes and their vigilantes. So if she had been operating Gotham for a while, the person would have known something about her, maybe. Because she's not the hide in the shadows and not let people see me type of character. That's just doesn't seem to be her personality. So for me, I'm thinking this is our very first introduction of her. And she's investigating something. And we don't know what it is. Maybe it's connection to this Gala, this artist who is a very interesting works in a very interesting medium, and I think Bat was investigating that person as well. And I think, I don't know if Mother Panic's aware of Gala yet, or if she's only aware of the one guy who had the artwork, if that's who she's going after. It's one of those things where I'm trying to figure out where they were coming from and what they're doing, but it's definitely going to be one of those. I want to see the meetup between those two. I want to see the Mother Panic Bat meetup and see how Bruce deals with her, because he's not always the most accepting sometimes. You think about it, in his city, you operate his way. It's his way or the highway. So and she doesn't seem like she's going to be toe the company line kind of person.
By the way, this is a good time for me to put a disclaimer on this episode, and really any episode that you've listened to of this show. I was looking at this whole sequence with what happened with the bodyguard and the fact that he saw artwork that came from Butchery. On this podcast in particular, you hear art that comes from Butchery all the time. And everyone listening that should be afraid of disappearing because they've witnessed such musical butchery in multiple episodes. You can't unhear it.
Yes, you've gone to a place now.
So this is a scary issue where art imitates life. I'm afraid I'm going to disappear. I'm afraid some of our listeners maybe they already have disappeared from listening to said singing. I'm just saying.
Or maybe they disappeared for another reason, going, I'm never doing that again.
The artwork thing was interesting, though, because I think when you're doing something like this and you're introducing a new hero, you've got to introduce an equally compelling villain to make you want to see that person follow through. I like the fact that she doesn't seem to know about Gala yet, as far as we know. And that part, to me, I want to know more about this villain. I want to know more about the villain's motivations. To me, it's a lot more fun when you see the hero discovered in stages. Like, already this guy is enough. I want to see her have a reckoning, because the bodyguard was the guy's lover. He showed him the artwork pieces because he's like, hey, we've kind of crossed this, threshold in our relationship. And he saw something that was obviously, from when we see her, something very horrid in the way that the artwork was done. So he let him in on his secret world, and because of that, lost this guy who clearly is not on board anymore, so to speak, and he knows his secret. So that part is very contemporary and very today as well. And I found that really interesting, how, their relationship was a relationship you wouldn't have seen 20 years ago in comics. It's nice to see that be a piece of this puzzle and a feeling very organic in how that piece went down.
Yeah, it's the one thing that kind of had me really wondering what the heck is going on is because you see at the end of the issue where he's trying to, the bodyguard is trying to figure out Mother Panic and figure out what kind of vigilante is she. Is she just a psycho to do good, or is she a psycho to do because she's a psycho? And I love how he throws out, it's kids, man. You gotta have, that's gotta matter or something. So what exactly? Because we see Gala doing one thing with the one person, using the blood as the medium. What about the kids, man? What kind of weird, what is it? Is it, because it's not just, cutting them open and blood. There's something beyond that. And I want to know what level of, oh my God, are we dealing with?
I know. And I think it's just enough, and the burning building in the background and that type of thing, where's all this coming from? They did a really good job. It was funny how much more I admired it in my second read through. It does it's one of the reasons why you and I talk on the show quite a bit about giving a book multiple read-throughs. I gained so much more from this title in the second read-through. I really felt like my attention was more focused. I'd kind of gotten over the everything's new bit, and I was going back through and really just kind of analyzing and enjoying the story. And they really did. It's a very compelling first issue. And I think there's a lot going on in it that makes you question this world, what's going on. It's very dark. Gotham, we've known, through Court of Owls and things like that, has a lot of things going on behind the scenes that even Batman didn't know. And I think constantly discovering these, high-profile secret societies is, and that's what part of this is, right? She's dealing in this underground, vicious art movement that they justify as art, but it's murder.
And I think it's going to be even beyond murder. I think we're going to be dealing with some serious nasty stuff. And I think, that for me was something that you really start to get a glimmer of at the end. Because you cutting, and slashing someone open and using their blood as an art medium, that's kind of sick and disgusting. Yeah, okay. But I think they're taking this even a level beyond that. And that's the part where I want to see her reaction to it. I want to see Bruce's reaction to it. I want to see how this thing plays out, because as I said, Bruce isn't the most, he's not always the best team player out there, and she's definitely not a team player. So you got two people who they're going to approach this differently. I see her not caring about the no-kill code, and she's going to be an eye for an eye. And we know that's not Bruce's MO. That's not how he runs it. So that's, for me, looking down the road, looking long-term, I see that being the big eruption between the two of them. And that's, I always like those kind of moments, because it's kind of interesting to see if, how much Bruce is going to change. Is she going to change? Who's going to give, and who's going to give first? And I think that is going to be an interesting reaction.
I agree. I think that part's going to be that's going to be the meat and potatoes of the story for me.
Yeah. And I tell you, you said it, and I got to just re-echo something about the artwork in this book, because, me, I'm not normally, for me, art that looks a little bit different, it has a little bit of a groove to it. It really needs to fit the story for me. And that's one of the things about this, having this kind of edge to it. Especially by the end, you talk about the burning building and just everything that was playing out. By my second read-through, when I do my art read-through, it so fits the story because of the nasty and the darkness that she's dealing with in this character. So when we first started, I was like, oh, okay, it's going to be, okay. And then by the time you get to the end of the story, you're like, oh, that fits so well. So when I went through and did my reread-through, you're seeing such a dark and seedy world that the art style just so fits it perfectly. And it was, again, multiple read-throughs really help me sit back and enjoy what I'm seeing.
One of the pieces that I really enjoyed in it, and I really did, I enjoyed my art read-through of this book immensely, because I got to commend not only the illustrative work, but the color work that went along with it, because when you take a look at it, they use a lot of the purples throughout the story because it's a Batman world, right? You want to do those dark tones, and I always appreciate that. So that's a compliment. Here's where they did something that was a really beautiful contrast. When she opens the doors and you get a chance to walk into the world of her mother, and they are two giant doors that are opened up as she's walking in. It's this whimsical, magical world of color. There's this carousel horse and these wonderful plants, and it's almost like you're at a Disney ride. And there's little, deer that are, obviously collectible deer or something like that, but they look like they're out of a cartoon. And that's traditionally just a soft, caring, loving world for her mom, who's become very childlike in those moments, who's also has this kindness to her that's very interesting. She's doing her singing of her, unique songs, looking at the person that she's brought there as being her audience. And she goes, every member of the audience should get a flower or something along that way. I'm poorly paraphrasing it, but there was something in that moment where I'm like, this is a sharp contrast to everything else that's been going on. And the colors in the illustrations really popped and showed that distinctively different world. It took me to a different place for those moments. And I really appreciated that, because I thought those pages were beautiful, very well drawn. I love, I went to the Disney reference right away, because I love that kind of stuff. I mean, I love, going on those type of rides, I like being transported to places. And I really felt like the way that was illustrated with these two giant purplish color scheme doors, framing your entry into this magical world that she clearly crafted for her mother to give her some sense of comfort, I thought was just really well handled, made me start to say, I don't know her whole story yet. And I'm judging her too harshly when I don't really know her yet. I loved that. I loved that twist where I was almost admonishing myself from it because of the mother. And I thought that was just really cool. It was a great example of the story using the artwork to show me something compelling, another layer of this person. Violet's an interesting character, and it's funny how I went from, I don't know that I'll ever consider her a very likable person, but I'm interested heavily in her. I'm on board for this journey. I mean, issue number 2 of this one, I will grab very quickly, which is funny. My first read through, I would have said something different. I would have said I would have read it, and I was interested in reading it, but I wouldn't have been diving for it. After my second read through, I'm very interested in this world.
Oh, yeah.
It's cool. These young animal titles actually, overall, I think have been something that have been very unique and surprising and interesting to me. And that part, I'm glad, because when you do a new line, there's always got to be that hook, right? That thing that keeps you coming back for more. And I do think they're doing some... I'm glad that they're not cookie cutter. I'm glad that each one has been allowed its own wiggle room to breathe, because I think there's a way for different audiences to grab different books from this line.
Yeah, I don't want to say they're all super freaky, because they're not all. And I think that's, for me, I was happy with it. They've got a little bit of the... what the heck are we watching, type of mindset to them, especially like, Doom Patrol and the Acid Trip that is Shade the Changing Girl. Those two have that visual treat of, what am I seeing here? But they also have that story that's laden in there. Then you've got Mother Panic pulling up now, where they're still keeping a freaky style, but it's not an insult to call it freaky. It has just that different vibe and different groove to it. But now we're putting something that it's probably in continuity, or if not in current continuity, there is a Batman in this universe. Because I was always looking at this Young Animals as its own separate universe. Well, maybe it's now in this universe, or maybe parts of this universe is in that one. So it's kind of a neat connection for me, and I'm glad that they're letting this happen and they're letting this expand. And each of the young animals, they've got their own kind of groove, but it's not, they're not locked in. It's got to be weird. Granted, this is kind of odd what we're dealing with, but it's still normal for Gotham standards.
Tim, Jim, do you want to talk? I almost called you Tim. Jim, we've only been recording for how long? Jim, do you want to talk Teen Titans?
Yes. Next discussion is on Teen Titans #1, Damian Knows Best, Part 1. The stories and visuals by Benjamin Percy with John Boy Mayers, colors by Jim, and it's CHARALAMPIDIS. Not even going to try, because I will insult him. Letters by Corey Breen, cover by John Boy Mayers with Chris Burnham and Nathan Fairbairn on variant covers, with Brittany Holzer as assistant editor, Alex Antone as editor, and Marie Janvis is the group editor.
And apologies for any name butchery there. I would have done the same thing. I do want to make mention, though, John Boy Myers, who did the artwork on this, he was only on the initial Rebirth issue and this issue #1. Due to creative differences, he's leaving the book. And I'm sad about that, because of the fact that I really enjoy the visuals on this. I'm a big fan of Benjamin Percy's writing. I think since he's been involved with DC's books, has done a really great job on comics and the writing. I've really enjoyed the artwork of this so far. So I'm excited to see a new artist come on board. I'm almost positive it's this week's issue that's being released. There's going to be the new artist on issue #2 of this book. So I'm curious to see what that looks like, because I've been really enjoying the art so far in the first 2 issues of this one. Sad to see him go, but looking forward to seeing what next project he winds up on. Honestly, when people leave books, if there's a creative difference, I can understand leaving. It's not working, and that's not good for the book. It's not good for the creative relationship. So I get it. And on that end, I don't usually get caught in I don't worry a whole lot about the finger pointing blame game, because I think that's usually very personal between the people involved as far as what led to all of that. Was it an editorial thing? Was it, the writer and the artist? Who knows? I happen to really like, just because of the fact that I enjoy these first 2 issues, both creative talents. And I don't know what led to all this, but, good luck to both, and good luck for the book. I can't wait to see who the new artist is going to be and see the book continue its direction, because I'm really enjoying the direction so far of this.
Oh God, yeah. This was an absolute, 100% love this. One, it's got my little monster, Damien, and you got to love just how his mind works. And I think that, for me, great story and visually very pleasing. So I'm very curious to see who's going to take over. I want to see what the next couple issues are going to physically look like, because we already got a pretty good idea on how the story's going to go. Or I don't want to say we got an idea how the story is going to go, because you never really know with Damian how a story's going to go. That, I think, is part of my enjoyment of it, but also then he's got an understanding of Damian. Just from the way the story was crafted, he understands who Damian is. And there's multiple facets of Damian's personality. We talk about Bruce all the time, like, who's the real Bruce Wayne? Well, who's the real Damian Wayne is also a neat story, because you see this opening sequence with him and Alfred in the cake. And I love just how, Damian and Alfred have this type of relationship now. It's something that's grown over years. He's still Pennyworth, so there's a little bit of air to it, but it's still, Damian respects Alfred, and he respects his opinion. Even though he doesn't always give it out, and lets his emotions out, he does value Alfred as a person, as someone who's there. And I think that, for me, these couple sequences was great, especially because right at the point where it looked like Alfred was about to kind of make excuses for Bruce not being there for Damian's birthday, Damian calls him on it. It's like, don't you dare make any excuses for him. But Alfred, being Alfred, he's not there to make excuses. He's there to help Damian along. He's there, he's there because he cares. He legitimately cares about Damian. I thought that was a great moment between these two, that, on top of everything that's going on in this series, I love the fact that they still make sure to show this personal relationship that Damian has with Alfred.
I really liked that this book felt like it was a continuation of what's been going on with him in Batman and Robin, and in Robin, Son of Batman. It didn't throw any of that out the window. I thought the art styling clearly took winks and nods to that. Obviously has its own flavor and flair to it, but really looked back at that work and said, I want to give people that same kind of feeling. And the interpersonal relationships with Alfred, I think exactly the same thing. I like when we see Damian's vulnerability. We see the fact that he was raised so weird, he's still a kid, and he has those needs, and he has those doubts. And even though he has this exterior strong confidence, there is another piece to him on the inside. You reference him as everyone's favorite little monster. He wasn't always. He was the guy you loved to hate early on. And it's funny, talking about Mother Panic before this, I can't help but wonder if I won't feel the same way about her down the road. Where in her own way, I'll start to like her as a character the way that Damian now is like one of my favorite characters. And it's very interesting to see his journey. I do, Jim, before we kick into talking further about this one, though, I sometimes forget to shout out Kickstarters on this show. And I do want to make sure to shout out a Kickstarter, because every so often there's a comic book or a book Kickstarter that I think is relevant to our audience. And there's a small little ad copy that we were sent, and I don't want to forget to read this one. Do you need a friend? Do you have trouble making friends? Damian Wayne is writing a brand new book called How to Make Friends and Influence People. And if his Kickstarter hits $10,000, so you really want to jump on board this one, there's going to be an audiobook version read by his friend Goliath. So you might want to jump on that right now. It's available on Kickstarter. There'll be links in the show notes. It's Damian Wayne's How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's his brand new book. He's going to be publishing, so it'll be great. But I really loved how the Rebirth issue ended. I'm like, they're all going to kill him.
The logic in Damian's mind is absolutely wonderful. Yes. And that's why I always call him my favorite little monster. I love this kid's strategery, that he's thinking, okay, I'm going to make a team, but let me do it my way. I'm not going to invite somebody to come on, join me for the good battle. No, I'm going to kidnap each one of them just to show them I'm better than you. And I love the fact that he did that, but then there is still a little bit more behind it, that it's, I took down you individually, that as a team, you're stronger than me. And even Damian, it was a really cool way to go about it. Now, granted, they're all really PO'd at him, and they have a right to be because he kidnapped them. But, in the end, I think they're going to get along just fine.
It's funny. I think it's one of the first times you've used strategery, and I actually agree with your use of the word, because what he did was wrong. And I actually love, you're right, though, taking the joking out of it. You're right, though, in Damian's mind, what he's doing makes perfect sense. And there's a logic and a flow to it that makes sense. And I think if you were somebody that knew him, like, he referenced Tim Drake. Like, Tim Drake would be able to explain this to the others and go, listen, this is what he was trying to do. You might want to give him a little bit of a pass because he's got some issues. I mean, and so you could kind of follow through on this piece that he was right in putting them in a position where they'd have to work together as a team and trying to put them in a place where they would have otherwise said no until they actually, through action, got to see that, hey, when we work together, we actually are stronger, which is really what he was trying to do there. And I agree with you on the sequence leading to that and going, boy, what he did was so wrong, but yet you can't help but say it was effective. So that's one of the interesting conundrums with Damian. I love that Goliath was there, though, because I was very afraid that when that series ended, as Damian was put back into the regular world, we wouldn't see Goliath anymore. I'm glad that they've fit Goliath into this as well.
Well, it's funny because you always think about with Teen Titans is about family.
Sure.
They're more than just a team; they're a family. And I love the fact that as dysfunctional as Damian Wayne is with his family, both sides, mom and dad's side, he's got extremely dysfunctional families. His Teen Titans would have also a dysfunctional family vibe to them. That it's so still. Again, it fits him perfectly that he would do this and he would have it. And I'm echoing all your sentiments about Goliath. I absolutely loved him. Just the usage of the character in the past. Glad he's still around. And Goliath is one of those cool characters that throughout the origin of Damian, that they've done, and they've shown the little glimpses of who Goliath is and what he's about, and just his pure loyalty that he has to Damian has been something it's beyond, pet, slave, servant, thing. That's one of Damian's friends, and that's the kind of friends he has. That Goliath has that loyalty level that goes beyond anything, any form of servitude, but goes towards pure friendship. And I think that, for me, again, they're seeing this massive monster, but eventually they're going to get a groove on who Goliath is and why he's around Damian. And those are the kind of stuff that down the road I want to see them understand. I want to see the little light bulb click, and when they go, oh, this kid isn't as freaky as we thought he is. He's actually a pretty decent person. I want to see those moments of this team making these realizations about Damian.
I agree. I think that's the loyalty part's very interesting with Damian, because Damian is fiercely loyal. We've seen situations where Damian could have turned to other sides who you could make strong arguments for, maybe better suited for the way he was raised, but in the end, he always chose loyalty. Even when he was maybe not trusted to do that, he's chosen loyalty. And that's been the interesting part of the journey with Damian. I think what makes him so endearing is there is some strong conviction to this guy. I'm glad that they didn't do the instant, Damian's this sweet good guy. That wouldn't be interesting to me. What's far more interesting to me is seeing this journey with him, continuing on the ride that you're not going to magic wand when this kid was raised this way. He's going to learn things along the way, make better interactions, make better choices for friends who he's with, try to develop his own better Teen Titans, so to speak. I loved his speech about Tim Drake. I thought the speech was great because I thought it was genuine. He really had a respect for Tim. In his typical Damian way, trying to be the better Robin, which he does with all of them, he's crafted in his own mind, his own way to take the Teen Titans and turn them into something. The criticism that he gives of the Teen Titans, it's kind of hard to argue with. Yeah. It's like, you've been all of these things. Now I'm trying to make Teen Titans into something more, and you all could be a part of that. I loved that. I really thought that played out really well.
Again, it's that showing that different side of him, and I think it's kind of neat, but also there is the whole hidden agenda, really, where he's got everything going on with, they're all targeted already. And they're targeted because of their association with Damian. They're targeted because of their association with the Bat. They're targeted just because of who they are. And now we know that it's Ra's al Ghul who is hunting them down. So I like the fact that he doesn't open with the fact that, hey, you all are targets. You're going to get killed, but together we can do this. He's bringing them together as a team, and then he's letting them know about the pending death and destruction that's heading their way.
I like that better too.
Yeah.
I think that was an interesting choice because there is a motivation to, hey, listen, we're just naturally good together. Like, forget Ra's al Ghul. You'd be a good team together anyway. I like that he didn't start with that. I think that was interesting. I liked Starfire breaking out, seeing her strength. I think this is a great bridge to continuing to move Starfire forward as a character. We're seeing a lot more of the Starfire that we had before the New 52. I'm a fan of this. If you're going to take a character and reboot them like they did with Starfire, I think there is a way, and they're showing it here, to get that character gradually back to their core. And they've really done it with this character. I think this character's benefited from some evolution during her various runs to the point where she's the character that we're seeing in this book, because they really nailed what makes Starfire a cool character here. And seeing her operate with the team. Are you caught up on Flash? Have you read the Origin of Kid Flash issue yet?
I'm not. No, I haven't read that one yet.
Okay. Well, we'll have to talk about that in the future, because I am, and they've. I'm not going to spoil anything, but the origin of this Kid Flash is in issues of the Flash that have been released in the last couple months. So that's been a part of the story in there. Well worth checking that book out if you're a listener of this podcast and you're like, hey, I don't know much about this Kid Flash. The last 3 months of issues of the Flash have led to this in particular. It's actually this most recent arc, so you might want to go back to the beginning of the arc. I'm kind of jumping you in partway through it, but there's a really cool arc in the Flash right now that has led to the origin of this character that's really interesting. So you're going to want to check that one out just to see who he is. But then we've got Raven, of course, who's got a mini-series currently. Are you reading the Raven mini?
I haven't. I haven't had a chance to read it yet. So,
okay. And
that was something that was kind of interesting, that I haven't read her miniseries yet, but jumping into this felt like Raven to me. This really had a good, solid connection to who I thought Raven is and who I thought what she's about. So I thought that was something I liked, the fact that, once again, I'm getting that comfort level with the Raven that's on the team, the Beast Boy that's on the team, the Kid Flash, the Starfire, all of these characters that are the Teen Titans. I'm feeling that, and I'm seeing it, and I'm understanding. It's that it's a little bit different, and in that it's Damian Wayne in charge of it. So whenever Damian's associated with something, there's always going to be a little bit of skewing that happens, because that's the way he is. But this still feels like the Teen Titans to me.
I am Robin, son of Batman, and this is the new Teen Titans. I loved that the Batman was in the shadow.
Yeah.
I love when they do that, because he's the son of the Batman. He's, kind of the legacy holder. There's almost that smirk on there that I thought was really, really great.
And I do like the fact that he refers to himself as the son of Batman.
I do too.
All the other, you think about it, whenever somebody talks to the other Robins, they always said, "What are you, Batman's kid?" Like, no, I'm not. I'm his partner, or I'm his, they always, I think they always refer to themselves as his partner. They never said, kid, where Damian's thrown out. No, I'm his kid. I'm actually, his son. And I always like that, because it's, again, as you say, it is part of the legacy of who he is. It's part of where he's going to come from. But also, it does give a little bit more of, he's had a little bit different training. And he has. We know as readers what kind of level of training this kid has had already. But a statement like that is to everybody else is, I'm not a Robin like you're used to. I'm the son of Batman. I've had a little bit more training. I know, since birth I've been doing this. And I think that is, I always like when he has that in there.
I don't make wishes, I make plans. I've lived in the shadows of great men, but I plan to be even greater. And the future is mine to claim as long as I can escape my past. And you see the dead bird, and you're only alive to celebrate your birthday because I've allowed it. Come home. The time has come for you to fulfill your legacy or die. Thanks, Thanks, Granddad. I wanted a basketball, but there's this. Thanks for that. But then when you go to Infinity Island and you kind of see this whole piece, I'm ready for a Ra's al Ghul story. It's been a while since we've gotten, like a good one, something meaty, and I've got a lot of confidence in Ben Percy to deliver this kind of story. I really want to see this Teen Titans team go up against Ra's al Ghul's new Demon's Fist and see what this team looks like. Very interesting. Looks like the thing I like about this is, I don't know if you saw that they're going to getting another season of Young Justice. That animated series is coming back.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Cool. I'm in an era right now where I'm really looking forward, with that coming back, this book back on the shelf now. I'm really into a good Teen Titans run. And I really want to see this one pay off. I want to see this be a big story and really just delve in media. My fingers are crossed that this is going to deliver what it looks like it's going to, because it looks pretty awesome as a kickoff.
Oh God, yeah, and I like this Demon's Fist. Just looking at that initial images of him, and you got the one dude back there. He's obviously a speedster. The one guy in the back with the blue kind of lightning on him. Uh-huh. If he's not a speedster, he's electrical. And you got Mystic kind of female, Mystic looking female in front. You've got then who I'm assuming with the demon head mask is going to be their leader. So that's going to be, you start figuring, when I'm looking at this, I'm figuring out, okay, who's going to go up against who? What's going to be the fight going to look like? And, just when you have an opening going, okay, one, they're trained by Ra's al Ghul. So we're dealing with really good training, really dangerous, really nasty level of people going up against the Teen Titans. So right out the gate, your first adversary is going to be huge, who's going to be dangerous, and I'm really looking forward to the fight.
I am too. Yeah, did you know that Young Justice was coming back?
I did not know that. So that's cool.
Yeah, were you a fan of that show?
Yeah, it was I caught it, after it was almost done. So it was weird for me trying to catch repeats and reruns of it. And now I'm probably going to jump on iTunes when we're done recording, and I'm going to start looking for it and start pulling things that way. And my new shopping now is iTunes. I absolutely love, what they have out there. And I'm just, I watch more TV in front of my computer now than I do actually in front of my TV.
Get an Apple TV, because all your iTunes stuff connects to it. And you just plug it into your television. I'm saying, like, as you get more of that library, it's fun to be able to watch it in front of your computer, pause it, and then say, I'm going to go down and watch the rest of this on the TV. And it'll pick up where you left off, which is really great. But for season passes, like Young Justice, for anybody that didn't listen to this, Young Justice was serialized storytelling. So, there were some done-in-one episodes to it, but there was usually a big over-arc to the whole thing that was going on, and incredibly well-written. So if you haven't checked out that cartoon, I can't recommend it enough as being just a really cool one that you put on your radar. A lot of this, I'm sure this one came back because of a big fan push for it, because it had an incredible fan base to it, deservedly so. It's really a great series. So if you're a fan of animated series that have a larger overarching serialized story, Young Justice was known for that. And it did this cool thing. Actually, I won't spoil any of that. I'll stop where I'm at right now, other than to say, start watching it. It's really a cool thing. And for something to come back after this amount of time and have another season to it, because it's been an extensive amount of time, says a lot about the quality of it and the fan base it developed, that there's a confidence in bringing it back, and they should. The nice part is each season was independent of itself. So when the new season comes out, if you haven't watched the others, I'm sure this will have a beginning, middle, and ending. But yet there's winks and nods to the past because of the fact that you're dealing with the same characters that add a layer to it for those that have been there for the ride. Definitely going to want to check out Young Justice. It's very cool. And iTunes is one of many ways to end up grabbing it, because the seasons are available on Blu-ray and DVD. I believe Blu-ray, but they're definitely available on DVD. Well worth it. Great animated series. Jim, our next discussion is going to be Supergirl number 3. This is Reign of the Cyborg Supermen, Part 3. The writer is Steve Orlando. The artist is Brian Ching. Colorist is Michael Atiyyeh. Letters Steve Wands. Cover by Ching and Atiyyeh. Variant cover by Bengal. Assistant editor is Andrew Marino. The editor is Paul Hemishk. And the group editor is Eddie Berganza. Supergirl is based on the characters created by Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster by special arrangement with the Jerry Siegel family. And apologies for any name butchery. This is an interesting book when it came back on board. First of all, I was dying for another Supergirl book because I've always loved the character. And, we just talked recently about the television show and how much we were digging and enjoying the television show. I'm a fan of how they handled this one. They brought in elements of the TV show into current continuity, but they didn't throw out the window everything that came before. They told a story that gradually led Kara to this point. Her power loss was one of the reasons why she got involved with the people that she did, This is how she ended up getting new Earth parents. It's how the Kara Danvers identity came into being, and I actually quite liked that. I'm a fan of that piece when they do it, versus sometimes they'll force things in and there's no real story to it. Like, there's no depth, there's nowhere to go with it. In this case, her having an Earth family who is embracing the fact that they're not really the parents, and she knows they're not the parents, but they're trying to act the role, and they're trying to do their part, and they're trying to help her. And there's a relationship that's trying to be built there. I find that interesting, and I like how they really are first-time foster parents with her, and we're seeing what those growing pains are like. And it's an interesting sort of tale about that. On top of the fact that we've got this continuity history of her dad's still alive. Well, boy, that's a very loaded statement I just made there, because her dad's Cyborg Superman and knows who he is now, but may have forgotten who he is, or maybe he wasn't. Maybe he always just wasn't like a very nice guy. I don't know. It's really interesting to read this storyline because you want it for so long. She was this fish out of water on Earth and was longing for home because she was out of the two Superman cousins, between her and Superman, she actually grew up on Krypton or in Argo City and wanted to go back to that home like any of us would want to. Like, this was where I grew up. Now you've put me in a completely different place with no friends, people who don't understand me, a completely different culture. I want the things that bring me comfort, and I can't have them here. Time has passed, though, and she's developed a life here and an understanding of that. Sometimes the question becomes, when is the cost too high to bring back that which you wanted before? And is it possible to do that? Is very interesting. This story is compelling for me because it starts to face and ask all those questions. It's a great book with a very likable Supergirl. That part's pretty critical for me because they've done these attempts at Supergirl before where she was not so likable. And I don't know, to me, Supergirl's like the one where you're kind of like, no, you really need to like this girl. I really like this Supergirl.
It's funny because if you had asked me on paper and said, okay, this is what we're going to do, and and explained out how she's going to get her Danvers family and yada yada, I probably would have said no. I would have said, I don't think that's going to work. Just because of my, I don't know if it's personal desire. I like parts when they kind of bring in the TV show, but I don't like it if they make it seem forced. And on paper, I would say this is forced. But when I actually sat down and read it, that was something I was like, wow, I like how they're doing this. And it was one of those things where, like you going along, I'm reading this going, you know what? I like this Supergirl. I like her parents. I like this interaction between them. I like how and why she's part of the DEO, why she's part of everything. And it was weird that, the fact that, if I had known going in this, I would have been a little bit more prejudiced against the story, probably. But the fact that I didn't have the spoilers, the fact that I didn't know what was going to happen, I was able to just get into the story being told. And this was a really good story. And this is a really cool superhero. And like you, I'm so happy that they kept pieces from the past. I'm glad they kept that her dad is Cyborg Superman. I'm glad that they kept the fact that she had that power loss and now she's back in their groove and now she's starting to be once again be Supergirl. And it's kind of like she's coming to her own again. Once again, Supergirl is coming back, and I like that. And this is one of those things where this is a really cool super story. With that super family. And I was wondering how they were going to handle it with technically her cousin's dead, because this universe cousin's gone. The Superman that's out there is from another universe, isn't her cousin. So how is she going to deal with it? Well, they're showing us how she's dealing with her family. And I want to see this Supergirl and Superman interacting, because we're seeing that she's got this longing for family, and she's accepting this foster family, and she's accepting these other people who aren't technically her family who are there helping her. And I like that. I want to see her interact with the Superman that we have, because he's a really cool guy. So there's so many things that are playing out with this. I'm glad we're not right now so locked in the fact of her and Superman, dealings with it. She's dealing with her own problems. She's dealing with her father. She's dealing with the department. She's dealing with her foster parents. There's so many different things that they're going with this, but we're not losing the groove of the story. And I think that's very talented in the storytelling process, that we can put all these different pieces together and still have this great flow through.
Yeah, I agree with you. That's the piece for me. See, I did know a little bit ahead of time. I tend to follow the news more than you do, and I don't mean that in any way, shape, or form as a knock. I actually, like you, I try to stay away from story spoilers before I actually read the story because I like to enjoy them. It's one of the reasons why we put spoiler warnings on the front of every one of our podcasts. We want to have spoilery discussions with people who have read the book, or for people that are like, listen, this is not a book that's been on my radar. I want to know some of the I want to know the details, so that way I want to see if this book is for me at all. So they like these kind of discussions for that purpose. And I think, we try to cater to both of those crowds. I don't want to ruin something for the person who doesn't want it ruined. Because of the fact that you and I feel this way. So it's interesting when I knew that they were going to start bringing in some elements of the TV series to this, and I was too afraid that initially, because they were doing a really good Adventures of Supergirl comic book digitally that I was really enjoying on the DC digital side. I read those weekly digital releases, and I really quite enjoyed that book. But that was meant to be directly linked to the television show, very similar to the Flash and Arrow ones that they've done. So that was intentional because it's that universe. In this case, I do like my TV universes separated, but this is going more of what they've done in Green Arrow recently, that route. They brought Diggle into that book in a way that I think is very interesting, and I'm really enjoying the character's usage in that book. It's a character that came from the TV series, but he is the comic book version of that character. It's not beholden to the TV series. It's not beholden to the entire TV series story. This is the same thing here with the parents. I find it more interesting that they've embraced the fact that she's had all this continuity before this. We're not going to throw that out the window. This is the next phase for her. And there's a reason, because of her DEO interactions, that she would have parents now. They're trying to help her lead a normal life to be able to have the dual identity. And when they're talking about going out into outer space, we're at the Danvers Brownstone in National City, and it's 1 hour before everything kicks off, and they're having this debate over going into space and the fact that you just got your powers back. Are you sure that you can even do this? You could get hurt. At least let us go with you. And she's like, listen, I've already lost my parents once. I will not let that happen again. Being faced with your dad who's a cyborg, you would want answers, right? Is it really him? I believe that now. I've come to the realization that it's him. Is there something still messing with his head? Is there some way to reach him? Is what he said true? He said he's bringing back Argo City. Is he really doing that? And how do I feel about that? I had to recently, I'm selling my father's home. When my father passed away, I inherited his house. It's the house I grew up in. It's been in my family since I was 2, so I don't know another home, than that one. I had a period of time where when I first inherited the house, it was an upgrade from the house where I was currently living, in the sense that it had more bathrooms, more space. My wife would have had an office, I would have had an office. After about a month of kind of cleaning things out, the neighborhood had changed where I lived. So I'm like, you sit there and start saying to yourself, is this going to be a viable place if 10 years from now we want to sell the house? What's that going to look like? You take a look at that and kind of go, I don't know on this one. It's one of those things where the simple thing is, can you go home again? And should you go home again? Or is your forward movement a new thing? We ended up buying a new house, and we're living in a new place. I'm currently in the process of selling that. But it was interesting as I was reading this, I'm making all of these connections to my life now where home's different than what it was when I grew up. And I moved somewhere where it's a lot more like home, where I grew up, and more of where I would like it to go now. And it's really interesting to kind of be reading this and making those connections. I think that's one of the cool things about comics. It's surprising to you when you read a story like you. I was walking in with certain concerns, and I'm like, man, I'm connecting with this book on all kinds of different layers. And man, Supergirl's just cool. and it's fun. I like these characters nowadays that they make you believe in hope. Because I think, there's been so much negativity lately on the internet and everything like that with with politics. I'm not bringing politics into this, don't worry. But I think it's nice to read a book like this that with a positive role model where you actually feel happy after reading it. And there's a character that you can get behind. I think this is very reminiscent of the show in the sense that she's a very likable character. I want to follow her. I can't wait to read her next adventures. The book makes me smile when I read it. Her interactions with all kinds of different people and new people that she encounters. She's really a model for how you start to meet people and interact with them, give people some benefit of the doubt, and just be this kind of cool person and have a code, a moral code, all these kind of cool things. And it's just nice to read something positive. And this book it's my positive fix. And the stories have got some really cool layers to them. It's just a really well-written title. Steve Orlando's just doing a great job with this book. It's really a great title. I'm really digging it.
Oh, God, yeah. And it's funny because you talk about why she's going into space. And I agree with you. I love the fact that, her mother, her foster mother is going to go in with her and say, hey, we're not going to leave you alone. But I loved her rationale behind it. It wasn't just, because this is what superheroes do. No, she's like, he's a broken man. I can't abandon him. I cannot abandon them to him. He's still my father. They are my people. I love the fact that she's doing this not just for answers for her own personal, but she is going, hey, those are Kryptonians out there. I got to make sure they're okay. I got to make sure, I got to see if I can help him. And I love the fact that's, to me, is the hero side. And I loved seeing that one scene right there where we get that glimpse of the hero. She's got, as you said, she's a very likable character. She's a very likable person. We're seeing that, but we're also seeing the hero. And I love those moments where you get that little glimpse of it. And I love the glimpses in the past, especially considering what she's dealing with. Her interactions with her mother were absolutely wonderful throughout this issue, and that's something I hope they hold on to, bringing in lessons of the past from Krypton.
Yeah, because you got to believe that there's a reason she'd want it back so bad. You know what I mean? Like you and I both grew up in the same place. We grew up in Euclid, Ohio. I think we both have great childhood memories, right? I mean, and I think it's one of the things. I think it's one of the reasons why we've been such good friends for so long. We have very similar upbringings. You kind of take a look at that. We lived in a neighborhood where, you could feel safe walking for blocks and blocks on Halloween and things like that. I think that's important. Halloween at my new home this year, we had kids coming from all over the place. People would drive here and just take their kids around the neighborhood. And I thought it was like, I'm like, really? This is what's going on here. I liked seeing a lot of kids at Halloween because you and I grew up with that experience where you could go 5, 6, 7 blocks and you had a big knapsack. And, it was a pillowcase I used. It was you'd load up with candy. And the only rule that you had to worry about back then was, if it was open, you threw it away. Otherwise, and if it was fruit, you threw it away because you wanted candy. I mean, but, other than that, there was no real rules to the whole thing. When you look at her world, it's always interesting when you see somebody's world and you go, you hear all the time stories about people who want to escape the place where they grew up in because they want to make a better life for themselves. And that's the other side of it. I can, sympathize with that and admire that, where you see somebody saying, hey, listen, this is how I grew up. I grew up tough. And while I can't connect with that in the sense that I didn't have that experience, I totally admire that is a challenge and love that there's somebody who, can sit there and say to themselves, hey, I want to make my life better. I want to make life better for my kids and for that. So when somebody takes those steps, equally, it's the other mirror image of that. And I admire that as well. When you see Argo City, I got to believe that Supergirl would want to go back there, that this would be something she'd be torn about. This would be something compelling. Those back parts, especially with knowing, I didn't know her full name was Kara Nizu or whatever. Yeah, whatever that is. I can see why she'd say, just call me Kara. But but I really liked those moments with her mom because they give you a sense of a different culture. And I always liked that in comics. I grew up being an X-Men fan. I think my understanding and respect of different cultures and also people being hurt by others because of their differences came from comics like that growing up, where I was like, oh man, like oppression sucks. And it really, it is. And I think comics have always been an outlet of talking about that. In this case, you see Kara's world is very different than ours. And you can see why her coming to our world would be something that would be jarring for her. And why the character was bitter at first or, had trouble connecting and adjusting. Because her world was so vastly different. Now you've seen her come full circle where she's embraced it. She's developed a life for herself here. She's this innocent kind of really good-natured, kind person who now is going back and having to face, what is my path here? Do I want all this back or do I want to stick with this life that I've built and have worked so hard to build? And taking the new mother with her, I think was really interesting because this is somebody who's trying to be a mother, a foster mother to her, isn't. Hasn't been this person before. And I think there is no manual to being a good parent. I think we get to see somebody here who's actually being a good parent, who, if you were to tell her, hey, you're a really good parent, she'd say, no, I don't know what the heck I'm doing. And I think sometimes it's embracing that part, I don't know what the heck I'm doing, that makes you a good one. You keep trying more because you're self-critical. And I really loved that layer of this was playing out. I loved seeing her mother. I get why she loves her mother and the culture. But I also love that the foster mother, I could see her developing a loyalty to this person because this person's trying to do right by her. And clearly reading books and talking to people with, I'm supposed to do this, right? And this is what I'm here for. But she's not doing it like in a wooden, robotic way. She's doing it in a way that says, like, I probably don't even totally realize it myself, but I do care about doing this right. And it's not just that I was given this as a job. There's something more here. And I don't think she'd be able to put her finger on that yet, but as a reader, it's really clear that's what's happening here. And I love that part of the writing because I feel that there's some significant layers to emotion that's going on with these characters that isn't expressly written. It's done through great dialogue and great interactions that really adds a lot of depth to this book. And it's to the point of what you talked about earlier. On paper, when you look at this, you'd be like, man, they're just kind of doing this shallow kind of connection to the television. Man, it's got so much depth to it. And that's the part that was really surprising to me, I think in the same way it was to you, and making me love the book even more that they didn't go that route. Yeah, sure, they brought in elements, and that's great. If you're somebody who watched the television show, there's things you're going to connect to in this, but this is totally a different story. They really are embracing the fact that this is the comic book world, not the TV world, and I love this book for that.
In the Cyborg Kryptonians, when she actually makes it to Argo City and she sees all of the different people that they're just the shell, the body shells with all the cybernetics keeping them animated, for a lack of a better term. I loved just her seeing that and her reaction and her appealing, trying to plead to her mother to see if a piece of her mother is still there. See if she can reach her mother. And I thought those were kind of really cool moments because, one, this is, you think about it, everybody is dead. Well, now they're kind of back. Are they the same? I don't know, maybe. Or is it just the Cyborg Superman, running the show? Is it just one central mind running everything else? And I loved how the fact that, in his mind, he's thinking, hey, I'm doing something good. I'm saving my people. Yeah, we've got to slaughter all of Earth to do it, but hey, we'll be fine. We'll be good. It's just, there's a price sometimes. It's that whole, sometimes you got to break an egg to make an omelet type of thing. And to him, his eggs that are going to break are multiple millions of people, and I think that for me, again, that makes for a really cool villain who in their mind is thinking, hey, I'm doing the right thing. I'm the good guy here. I'm the savior of Argo City. I'm the savior of Krypton. And that's where it's kind of like, dude, you're going a little bit too far on this. And I like that she's seeing that by the end of the issue. She's seeing what's going on, but she had to give them a shot. She had to make sure and see what's going to happen. And in the back of my mind, I'm still wondering what's going to happen to the cybernetic Kryptonians. Are they still going to be around when everything is said and done? Are they going to be a brand new society? Or are they going to be completely gone and his car going to be completely alone in the universe? Those are the kind of stuff that as I was reading these issues going, oh man, come on. There's so many different things they can do. And I love when you're running down the story and your mind just starts, drifting on different ways. They could go this route. They could go this route. They could do a whole new society type of thing. What's going to happen? And I'm very excited for the ending just because of this base story that's getting crafted. And that's just one small portion of Kara's life is this one bit. There's still the personal side of her. There's still her Catco. There's still her with DO. There's her with the Danvers. There's so many different things they're going to go with this story that I'm really excited and looking forward to future issues of Supergirl.
I like for the dad that it's got to be a way to justify his own existence, because here's the thing. For that group to become a society, Jim, they have to have the spark of life. Right now, his only way to achieve the spark of life is to take the lives of the humans on Earth to rebuild Argo. Their spark would ignite them. So that's obviously Supergirl's going to stop this and save the day. For them to become that society, something would have to happen. It may. It may be an atrocity. Who knows? We'll see what ends up happening in the long run with this book and those characters. It's something that's interesting that's been crafted in this one, though. It's her. I like her dad being Cyborg Superman in this, because it really is. He has to justify his own existence. Is there validity to his own existence now in the way he lives? The only way to do that is he's the Frankenstein monster who's trying to make people like himself. In essence, he's no longer her dad. At least the experience has so taken him away from his humanity, and I don't know how you grasp it after this. I really don't, with how disconnected he is. That part, to me, is incredibly compelling, because it was something that they did deal with in the New 52, start addressing that Cyborg Superman was her dad. I love that it's paying out here in this book now, with her being so much more likable. And I like that her journey to likability was quick and organic in the New 52. Because I didn't want her to go back to, there was a period of time in the previous universe where Supergirl was recreated and she was downright a brat. You don't want Supergirl to be, I don't mind if you take an organic journey where the person eventually becomes this likable person and you go on the ride. I've quite liked how they've done it with the Supergirl in this time around. But you don't want to do that for too long. It's one of the reasons why, we're big fans of Jamal Eigel's artwork. And when he was on the book was so great because she was a very likable Supergirl. That's part of, and the inherent part of the Supergirl part is she's like, we talk about Dick Grayson being the ultimate big brother, right? Supergirl should be the ultimate big sister. She's the one you got to look at her that way, right? And she's that cool character for that end. You mentioned Catco. We'd be remiss if we didn't mention how interesting that is in this story. What I love is Ben Rubel, who, he's this eager young kid who's looking for an opportunity, but he's actually this nice guy too. He covers for Kara. He didn't have to do that. If anything, it'd probably be more to his benefit to not cover for her. But Cat goes along with it, even though he does. I like that this kid, even though, he's an opportunist looking out for himself, there's a nice guy in there somewhere. I want to know more about him. They've developed an interesting supporting cast to the point where he's not a throwaway character to me. I find him interesting too. I like seeing her out of the costume and seeing what that world's crafted like. So Catco's given an opportunity for that to be on board. They've got a lot of different layers on this piece because of it.
Yeah, again, it was, the whole Catco thing with her dealing with, with Cat Grant and all that. And again, pulling it from the TV show, the fact that it's National City and everything they're going on paper, I wouldn't have liked it. I think I would have been like, they're forcing it too much. Like you mentioned earlier how they brought in Diggle. I loved how they brought in Diggle because, they're introducing a character that's from the TV show, but they gave him his own personality. They gave him his own groove, why he was around with the Queen family, who he was, everything. But it's funny because seeing this, I'm digging the stuff that I digged about Cat Grant on the TV show, we're kind of getting that same type of coolness and some interesting interaction that we're going to get with her and Kara. I want to see that, kind of follow up. I want to see more about her, Kara and Ben. Is Ben going to figure out who she is? That's the thing that's got me wondering. That's the first thought that popped in my head is, and for lack of a better term, is Ben going to be her win? Is he going to be one of those guys who around Catco who's helping her keep her secret identity? Or is he just going to be another character who she's going to interact with? Those are the kind of stuff that I'm wondering about that, because we've got this big, huge, massive story going on, but we now have this building for the future stories with the Catco stuff. I like the fact that they're making sure to give us a piece of each of the story so it goes through, so it can keep the flow through in future issues.
Yeah, that part's pretty important to me. It's I love the Cameron Chase stuff that's being developed in this. I think that's pretty important to me.
Yeah.
With the whole DAO thing. Jeremiah Danvers. It's great to see him be a part of this show because I've really quite enjoyed that character. I think there's a whole bunch of interesting things that are going on in this book that give it the sense of it's not just about Argo. It's not just about her life with Catco. The life with the DEO has its own thing. I like that these characters that are supporting cast, very similar to what I like about the television show, they're developing their own side stories that are going on as well and their own interactions with each other. And that's really important to develop in a book. It's that Team Arrow piece is something we always refer to. I like that this book's starting to develop a Team Supergirl. They're not going immediately to every single element that works in the television show. They're taking a look at the TV show and going, okay, there's an opportunity with this to be able to make a bridge for that audience that's watching TV right now if we bring in certain elements. But how do we do that organically within the comic? I would love to have been a fly on the wall in the meetings as far as the proposal for this book, how they planned this out, because they really did a brilliant job. I think this is a great example of good planning about taking a look at, there's elements that are working on TV right now that really would make great comic book stories, and let's bring them in. And I don't know how much of that was, an edict or a part of this, but they really did a great job of making that something that enhanced the book instead of detracted from the book, which is a challenge. It's a great title. This is another book that the artwork, I think, the artwork is a little bit more animated series in its presentation to me with a modern edge to it. Please don't take any of those comments as diminishing. I really like the style of this. There's something very unique to this art style that's different than any other book that I'm reading right now. And I like that this book has its own theme that just sort of fits what the storytelling that's going on here. It can go very hopeful and very dark. And I think it's a great example of pencil work and inking working really well with color work, because this book is bright, it has a lot of pop, but can be very... Cyborg Superman looks downright menacing in some of these sequences, and I really like that part of it.
Well, he looks downright menacing, but I also think he looks awesome. I really do like the look of this Cyborg Superman. You think back to how the classic Cyborg Superman was, and this one looks like he has Kryptonian technology. It's that same kind of like when they first introduced the new costume, how it was more armored, and people were like, I don't know. And my first reaction was it looked like something an alien would have. This to me looks like alien cyborg tech, alien, this has that groove and that feel to it. So I like this look over the classic traditional Cyborg Superman, to be honest with you, just because I think, it has, that... it has that Kryptonian groove to it. And I agree with you on the art style that it does look a little more animated, but we still get some great emotional spectrums, especially facial looks on Kara. I love when, the moments when you have when she first starts interacting with her cyborg version of her mother, just how she's trying to reason with her. And then later when she sees that same cyborg mother carrying, the Danvers in, and just the shock and the horror on her face, like, no, you can't do that, high emotion, just that beautiful, just moments of wow, from this. So this for me was a great art and writing team working well together. I'm very happy with this team.
I am too. It's I like that these are big stories. I like that they're multiple issue stories. I like that these have built over time from continuity from her. I can't wait for more. I don't know where the Cyborg story is going to go from here. You're asking a lot of great questions about that. Even seeing, her mother carrying around Eliza and knowing that they're trying to use Eliza as a sacrifice to bring back the mom is, to me, just whoa. Talk about something that would make somebody torn. You're like, I would love to have my mother back, but at the cost of my foster mother? I mean, who I'm just developing a relationship with, but starting to see this person actually genuinely cares about me. When you're somebody who's good, inherently good like Kara is, the shock and horror of that whole thing, this really is a scary story, especially when you see them flying towards the Earth with Argo in tow. It's really a scary story, and I love this. I really love the layers of this one, because the next issue is Reign of the Cyborg Superman. I can't wait to see the next issue. This is another book that I'm really glad we're getting with some frequency, because I'm glad to have Supergirl back, because we went through a period where we didn't have Supergirl. And having this book back regularly now is something that's really become important to me. You don't realize sometimes that you miss a title until you get back a really good one that really captures what makes that book cool. And this is one of those that I think has benefited from that. Speaking of books, you want to talk about Cyborg?
Yes. Our next discussion is on Cyborg number 5. The writer is John Semper Jr., with pencils by Alan Jefferson and Derek Donovan, inks by Scott Hanna and Derek Donovan, colors by Guy Majors, letters Rob Lay, with Paul Peltier and Scott Hanna, with Guy Majors on the cover, Carlos Diano and the variant cover, Brian Cunningham, group editor, Amende Torotero, assistant editor, Harvey Richards editor, and of course Cyborg was created by Marv Wolfman and George Perez.
I love this book. This issue was particularly interesting because the art shifts halfway through. I mean, it's a pretty drastic shift halfway through. But the story was so compelling to me that I was fine with it. I'm like, wow, I'm really enjoying this story. As far as the series goes, you know, we're very early on into this series. I love the exploration of Cyborg's humanity. You've become so... I think one of the things is I grew up like watching The $6 Million Man. It was one of my favorite shows as a kid. But he always looked human. You know, I mean, every so often, you know, he would go all Luke Skywalker, where part of him would get injured, and you know, you would see that there's cyborg, you know, materials underneath there. But overall, you know, to the average person, Steve Austin had a swagger and always looked like him. Cyborg, because of the cybernetics on his face in particular, but also the fact that he's got that armor on his body. Yeah, we found out that recently he can morph his body to present the illusion that it's human skin all the way across. But the amount of, as he mentioned, the amount of processing power that it takes for him to do that is huge. And the slightest concentration change drops the illusion. So it's interesting to see this guy also facing this, am I human? I'm already questioning it. I've heard that my father's questioning it. Who else is? Who else thinks that I've lost a soul? I'm no longer, you know, what makes a person from the inside? I like the fact that as I'm reading this, I'm ready to shake him and go, dude, you got more soul than 90% of the people in this universe. Just by the fact of the things that you do and how you've worked past your hardships. I love the supporting cast in this, because there's a sequence in this issue in particular where he's an inspiration to people with disabilities, because they look at him and he doesn't look at himself. He looks at his things as enhancements that separate him from being human. They connect with him and go, no, you're an inspiration to us because you have these disabilities and yet you keep working past them. I loved them going that route. I thought that was really interesting to take this character and connect to that type of situation. I love their use of him being part of a community, I should say. And I'm saying just a kind of a global community of where he lives. And seeing him out in the streets with Blue. Blue is a great character. Blue is one of my favorite characters in this book.
It's when the past universes of Cyborg, when he had his own series, and then it shifted into this current one. I love the fact that we had a great flow through from the past into the rebirth titles. This was one of those titles that probably could have continued on with the previous numbering, and it would have kept the groove going, and it wouldn't have been such a dramatic change. But I'm glad they did do the renumbering for him, because it gives it a fresh start, even though it's a continuation, which I'm very happy they're doing continuations of the past. They're not throwing it out, but it did give him this great starting point. And I love the fact that they're now really starting to flesh out the support cast that's going to be around Cyborg, and making it not just about the man, with the cyber, with not about the cyborg, but about the man who is Cyborg. And I like that, we're seeing, him interacting in Detroit, him interacting with people. You mentioned Blue. I was like, Blue. I was hoorahing because he's, again, you you thought he was going to be just kind of a throwaway character, but now you're seeing, no, they've got more stuff. He's going to be kind of that conscience, that connection to humanity that that he needs. That, you know, every one of these heroes needs to have that personal connection to who is, you know, to who and what is society. And I think that we're going to see that interaction between him and Blue. I'm very happy that the way they're using him and the way they're using the city, because we always talk about Gotham is a personality. Well, guess what? Detroit has its own personality as well. It has its own issues. And within a couple pages, we see the great and, you know, the not so great parts of Detroit. And I like the fact that they're showing all sides of it, you know, that everything's got that, you know, there's no one way to look at something. You have to look at it from all different angles. And I think that, for me, is where this story is going to go, where this character is going to go, where these people are going to go. That I'm very curious and very thrilled to see Cyborg get that kind of in-depth look that he deserves.
It's funny when you look at comic books. Like growing up when I was a kid, and I'm going back to elementary school, I was like the nerdy, geeky kid who liked every geeky hobby you could possibly imagine, and none of the cool ones. So, you know, you kind of like feel isolated during those years. But then you read comics like this and you see this kind of stuff. And it was one of the things comics was, you know, maybe things aren't so bad. I'm not half robot. I mean, it's, you know, that type of stuff is really inherent in what happens in comic books when you read them, where you kind of either gain sympathy for somebody else's plight or you kind of put your own in perspective. It's one of the things about these characters overcoming their own adversity. It does increase, I think, if you're reading comics properly, a sense of sympathy for others and a sense of, which I think a lot of times that's one of the biggest problems plaguing our society is, don't always assume you know what somebody's going through, but be that sympathetic ear and you know, be willing to understand and to learn and educate yourself. And I think comics are a great example of a medium that kind of forces you to do that. And this is a great story for that. I mean, Vic is a cool character. You know, he's this guy who had it all together. He was a football star. Granted, his relationship with his father was always strained because of what happened to his mother. But you know, he had a lot of things happening that were positives for him. And you could actually argue that his family life stunk, but that at least he had friends through and relationships through the fact that he was a football star. Well, that was all yanked away with his accident. So now you've got this horrible relationship with Dad, who's clearly got his priorities screwed up. I mean, as we've seen many times in this. And Vic's lost part of his memory along the way because of things that Dad did to him. I loved that twist in this series. I know we're kind of jumping back to some of the previous issues, but I don't know how you can talk about what's going on now and not talk about the fact that violation of, you took my memories, and some very important ones. There's a whole relationship, two whole relationships actually, that I didn't remember. One started to come back. I still can't place the other. And this was the person that I loved so much that I left this girl who I had a good relationship with because I loved her. I knew who it was because it couldn't have been more broadcast that it was going to be this scientist. But I love that he doesn't know. And it's almost getting in it is getting in the way of their relationship currently because he can't let that progress because he's still seeking this person that he doesn't remember who is her. And I love that tragedy right now. It's like, no, dude, she's right in front of you. You already were reconnecting with her and you didn't even know it. I love this story. I really think it's very well written. There's twists and turns that are happening in this that are not happening in any other title. That part, I think, you know, Dad's a mad scientist. I mean, I'm a tech junkie. I love that kind of stuff. But Dad's a mad scientist gone wrong. He's doing things that are, you know, you talk about at what point is it too much, right? At what point do we try to improve ourselves too much? Do we try to enhance ourselves too much? At what point do we lose our own humanity by focusing too much on the tech? I think that's a question that's very much on people's mind right now. This story, for any tech junkie, I think it bridges to the audience that isn't. You know, if you're anti-tech, I think there's a lot in this book for it. This book, it really is catering to everybody. This is an everybody book. And Vic Stone is very cool.
One of the things that really got me with this was I've dig Cyborg. I thought he was a great character, and he was one of those characters that I didn't have that strong of a knowledge on. And then as we're doing the show, I'm learning more about him. I was like liking him, but I always had a little nagging feeling about how he felt bad about what happened. And and part of me is thinking in my head going, hey, if I had those upgrades, that'd be kind of cool. That'd be kind of neat being a hero. And one of the things that this version has really done a great job for me is showing the downside of being Cyborg, the downside of being the character, to the point where I understand, why he is down on the life, why he is, why he sees it as kind of a tragedy, not as this really great, wonderful thing that happened to me. And I think that for me was the best part about how this story played out. And it's a combination of many things with when they start going into the memory losses, they start going through the loss of who he is. Going into this, he's still dealing with the fact that, is he Vic Stone still? Is he dealing with that? And part of his personality, is it who he was before? He truly does not know if the choices he's making is stuff that Vic Stone would make. And I think that for me was a huge part of it, that he's dealing with the humanity of who he is. And I thought that was a wonderful just part of it. But these little things that pop up where every time he's looking at someone, they automatically do the scan. And they automatically tell him details about the person and stuff like that. For me, if I was going through that, when I first saw that, I was like, oh, that's kind of neat. Then I started thinking about it. What if every person you interacted, that would pop up? Every single time you're dealing with somebody, you're learning all this stuff. That would drive me nuts. Not to just be able, because there's times when I'm very happy to just deal with somebody on the surface level, not know the behind the scenes behind them. I like sometimes that interaction where I'm just what I'm dealing with, what I'm seeing, who they are, that's what I know. I don't want to know the hidden dark secrets that they have. He's pulling up that information automatically. That's just the way the program runs. That's just how he is. And I love seeing that, how there's positive to it, but there's also going to be a negative side of it. There's going to be a darkness that gets associated with that. And I thought that for me was just kind of a great understanding of why he feels the way he feels. And I really start feeling, a character that I liked, I'm like, okay, I understand this guy's pain a little bit. Granted, you'll never completely understand, but we're getting this understanding of why he's going through and what he's dealing with. And I'm very happy that we're seeing, again, the man behind the machine. We're not just seeing Cyborg, we're seeing Vic Stone. We're seeing him deal with all that kind of stuff.
Cool. Yeah, that part is, to me, I think, really interesting, too. It's the fact that we're seeing the different layers of what that would mean. We're in an age where information is at our fingertips, and sometimes too much information. There are things that really deserve to be private. If you're a friend to somebody, they have a right to, if they're going through tough times, if they got things going on, to make their own choices on what they let you know and what they don't let you know. And I think sometimes we have an immediacy of access to things about people that, really are none of our business. I would rather find out because that person trusts me enough that they want to, or maybe it's something they choose to keep secret forever, unless it directly impacts me. And there's a huge difference with that. I don't have a right to know. If it directly impacts me, sure, because that impacts me. But if it's something that they're going through and all that, I think one of the things we have lost a little bit of sight of is respect of boundaries when it comes to that. It's very easy to stalk somebody on the internet and find out information about them that, even though it's there, it doesn't mean it's your right to go and seek it out. There's a huge difference between the two concepts. There's a lot of information out there. I don't spend a whole lot of time on the internet searching out what my friends are doing. It's just not my thing. I think sometimes people post way too much information about themselves on Facebook, for example. And I love Facebook. But I think that there's certain things that are still meant for face-to-face or phone conversation that aren't meant to be out there for the public. It's an interesting balance, especially I'm saying that as a bona fide tech junkie. I do think that there's boundaries that need to be set in today's internet age. I think it's probably the area where we should educate ourselves so much. That's one of the things I love about this book. I really feel like this book speaks to me. and speaks to everyone on a lot of contemporary issues. It's facing them head on and making us kind of look at this world in a way that's not preachy. Like, I feel like it's a discussion where I don't feel like if you're a tech junkie, you walk out there going, oh man, everything I do is awful. No, it's not that. It's more of there's certain cautionary tales in this that you're kind of like, yeah, at the same time mixed with the right amount of cool. And I think that balance is pretty neat on this book because it never comes off as preachy. And I think the writer has a really good balance of, this is a guy who is constantly struggling with his own humanity. And yet, I would argue he's one of the more human DC characters in the way that he deals with people. Case in point, my favorite is Imitation of Life, Part 5 Regeneration. I know I mentioned Blue before, and I'm going to go crazy mentioning this character over and over again. The two of them are walking along on the street. He's got a hoodie on. He thinks Blue doesn't know who he is. I'm pretty convinced by this point that I'm like, Blue's telling you he doesn't. Blue's not. Actually, Blue never says that he does or doesn't know.
Yeah.
He's just treating him normal. And I think that's what Vic is finding so great about hanging with Blue. He can just be Vic without that. I love that Blue knew all along he was Cyborg.
Yeah.
And still treated him like just every other person.
He treated him like Vic. And I think that for me was a great moment because you have this blind musician. That's what Blue is. If you haven't read the issue, so that's why Vic's thinking, oh, I can, his scientist friend who is really his girlfriend in the past that he doesn't remember. Introduced Vic to Blue. Introduced Vic because Vic is having issues with his humanity. And it was a great scene in the last issue when he was in the jazz club listening to him play. And you really see Vic, just get connected to the music. And again, it's all about the humanity and appreciation of what is the music. But as he and Blue are walking on the street, this blind guy, and I did air quotes around the word blind, sees a lot better than Vic does. He sees the different people. He knows the gangbangers on the corner. Well, he's like, yeah, they're dangerous, yeah, but I've known most of those kids since they were little. I've seen what they went through. I know what they've gone through. The one kid, Clark, I have no idea how to pronounce his name. Zephon. Zephon Clark, who's running past, who's basically running from the cops, and Blue knows he's running from the cops. Blue probably knows why he's running from the cops, but he still stops him. And it, brings in our crooked cops that come into the picture. And it's the whole thing where Blue knows all that's going on. He knows the darkness. He knows the light. He knows that the one female on the corner isn't really a prostitute. She's an undercover cop. And he knows that. And and I loved how this blind guy knows all this stuff going through, and he asked for Vic to walk him to the VA, but in reality, it's setting up for something else. And I really liked how that notion of the blind, it's the blind leading, and the blind has much better sight than this cybernetic superhuman who can scan people and do all that stuff. But it's the whole notion of what are you looking with? Are you looking with your eyes? Are you looking with your heart? And Blue sees the good in people. Blue sees the darkness in people. And he knows when you need to work with the, which part you need to deal with, because his dealing with the crooked cops was absolutely wonderful. He didn't give them anything. He didn't give up anything.
Wait, can I stop you on that piece though? Because you keep referring to them as crooked cops, and I don't think you're doing justice enough. What's really going on here? They are racist crooked cops. It's a piece that I thought that this book handled really well, because I think it's important not to dance around that, because they throw a slur at them. Then they blatantly try to bully them into giving information, assuming that they were wrong, to the point saying, hey, what happens if I say that you're pulling, and they're really pulling the race card on that one. You were pulling my gun. And they're threatening them in a way that is really unethical. And I've never been, obviously, a victim of racism. What I like about this, Vic and Blue at this point are my friends. I've been reading this book and really enjoying them. Seeing this happen to two of my friends, it puts you in the perspective where, not that I'm experiencing it the way they are. I don't mean it that way, and I'm not making light of it. But I do think when you start to, in comic, as we all know, I talk about on the show all the time, once you start hanging with these characters, you feel like you're walking along with them. I feel like I am the white friend who's like sitting there hanging back going, I want to punch these guys. I'm probably going to be hauled off into the car because of what they're doing to these two people. This is a blind guy. They're accusing him of not being blind. I mean, and honestly, they're doing it, let's be honest, because of his skin color. I loved their handling this, because what they did is they do this segment, which was about a page and a half that is this intense segment. It didn't take away from me for the hope of this book and just how cool Vic and Blue are. I thought their handling of that was really cool. I thought it really... I don't think it made police officers in general look bad. I think it made these two look like racist, crooked cops. It doesn't mean that all of them are, and I don't think the book was implying that. But it was implying that people in certain cities wind up in this type of situation, and this is a reality. And this is what people are dealt with. These are two guys who were walking along on the street. They did no harm to anybody other than the fact that they were just walking, hanging, having a conversation. Just because a kid happens to walk by them, they were treated like they were guilty right when the crooked cop got out of the car. And it is because of his racism. I really thought they wrote this extremely well, where I was like, man, this is an atrocity. This was really wrong. It was a small segment. It totally didn't bring the book down for me. If anything, it just, brought this, wow, it's bringing to light a really cool reality. This is something that, not cool reality, you know what I mean? It's something like, this is reality. It's doing it in a cool way where you're like, you know what? I see this through the eyes of Vic and Blue. And helps me understand the plight of people who've been through this, because I can't understand that from my own perspective. I thought it was just really well written, and I think this is a great example of comics educating you through experience that does mimic real life. And I thought it was just really well done. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off on that, because I know you were actually making a good point, and I'm like, this is really a powerful page and a half in what they did, and I think a very bold page and a half in what they did. I really was taken by it. It was just a great example of how you take that. His partner is letting this go on.
Well, and that was the thing. That was the one thing I loved about this sequence, because a lot of times in TV shows, movies, comic books, if you're going to have your crooked racist cops, there are going to be two white guys. And there are going to be two white guys in a predominantly black neighborhood. That's how they always play it. This one, it's not. We have, two. That's why I kept saying corrupt, not just corrupt racists, because we've got two people. They're both bad guys. These are two bad cops, both of them. The one guy's got a little bit of, he goes beyond just being a bad person. It's beyond just being a bad cop. There's more to, towards him. There's the bully side of him. There's the racist side of him. There's the cowardly side of him. Yes. Which I loved how they really pulled all this out in a couple pages. Because especially, that whole bit where when he's talking to Vic, and he's like, well, matter of fact, what if I say you're reaching for my gun and I need to do something about it? Now, here's the thing. When you reach for a police officer's gun, it's generally assumed you're reaching for the gun to shoot the cop, which means now it's justifiable that he uses lethal force. That cop, if you're in a fight, if you're struggling with a cop and you're pulling at their gun, there's no other reason to pull out the police officer's gun other than to say, I'm going to use this on them. And that's what he was throwing out there. He was saying, hey, I could shoot you dead right here, right now, and I'd be fine. And I love the fact that he immediately went to that. And now, loved as, not as it's a good thing, loved as in I loved how they showed this guy, because it really showed not only just how a bad person he is, it really does show the coward in him. That he's not willing to, really stand up and do what's the right thing. And especially right the next panel when he's standing there, he's got his gun out, he's ready to use it, and Cyborg just drops the hood.
Yes.
And you see Cyborg. You see the look like, oh, you want to dance? Let's go. I love the fact that especially because the next panel is them taking off, and even Blue's like, wow. They left in a hurry. I wonder why. Beats me. I love that sequence just because, Cyborg didn't say anything. He just dropped the hood and gave him the look saying, let's go. And those were things like, because you have, and it was great, even the layout, because you have on one page, you have it going on, you flip the page, and then you get the payout. Then you really get to see, oh, okay, yeah, those guys are gone. They're not going to be around again.
This book rocks. I mean, that sequence to me was really cool because these are my friends at this point that were going through this. Because that was pretty critical because I think if you did this like the first issue, something would have been lost. By this point in time, not only do I care about Vic, I care heavily about Blue. They've done a really good job of developing these characters. So when they were walking down, I love that they did this pleasant sequence where the two of them are just walking and chatting. I'm like, they set this serene setup where you felt like you were walking with them. And like, how cool would that be, right? You know, like I'm hanging with my friend Vic in blue. Vic happens to be Cyborg. I mean, that's like a fanboy's dream, right? I mean, that type of thing. It's, why do we like seeing celebrities at cons and things like that? It's that whole bit. So I'm having that moment in the story. That's where, they've pulled me in. They got me hooked. Then they go and do that route, and I thought it was really just organic and well handled, where I was like, man, it is a great example of where a well-written story can make you angry about that kind of treatment of people. I think that part was like something that I really enjoyed. Then they went back to this great hope-filled segment. That's what I love about this book. They don't make that the whole story, because it's not. And I love the fact that they're saying, these are two stand-up guys who they are above that. They're more than that. Vic and Blue are more than that. They are, and you see them at the Disability Center with the surprise party where it turns into this whole bit where it doesn't take anything away from the tragedy of that sequence, but it shows you that these are people, and look at how they're celebrating each other and Cyborg and their own, tragedies. These people are all got disabilities, and they're celebrating this guy saying, hey, you're an inspiration to us because look at all the things that you do. And I'm like, wow. My wife used to read to the blind when she was at Cleveland State, as she was going through as one of the jobs she took, actually, because she lived on campus. I always admired that because she would do like the books on tape thing with them. So she'd be there actually reading with them, but then it would be recorded so they could hear it back later. And part of it was comprehension for school, just being able to, the same way that we would highlight and reread passages, they would listen back again and be able to do them. So it was a way to act as a bridge so that way they could access the exact same content. They could be a part of the class in the same way as any other student. That was a really cool thing. And I just really, in this whole sequence, I'm like, this is neat. Seeing this community band together. This is a support group for people with disabilities, and just how hope-filled they were. I love the dog, the training dog for the blind being there, and just it was a great artwork sequence showing a diverse level of disabilities that people go through and face. And I thought it was just neat. It was a neat part of this story where we've seen a lot of high-impact alien robot battles. And you pull back from that and see this guy street level interacting with real people and having an impact with those real people. It's something that you won't see in this way in other books. And it's smart of them to embrace this because it just adds a real world layer to the DC universe. This is something that you wouldn't see elsewhere. Or if you did, it would be in passing and wouldn't be a part of the culture of the book. This book has a culture to it that I really enjoy, that's very different than the other books that I'm reading, and makes Vic, to me, feel, for a guy who's struggling with his humanity, he's one of the more human characters I'm reading right now because I feel like I'm learning a lot from Vic. And that's fun for me. Very cool.
Oh, God, yeah. And it's funny because you think about it, we're, 11, 12 pages into the book.
Yes.
And this has just been Vic and Blue walking and talking and chatting, and I'm still going, this is a great issue. It didn't have any big battles with any aliens or things blowing up and anything. This is still a great issue. And I think that's something that, when you're crafting a story, that you can do that. And you can have it where you don't need something big explosions. You don't need, really cool fight sequences going. You can actually just delve into who is the man, who is the person, what is he dealing with. And I think that for me has been one of the issues that I'm really loving about this issue in particular, because when we were originally going to record this, it was before this one came out. So when things got delayed and everything, and this issue came out, I was so glad we included this because this really had a great personal side of him, and it really had some cool stuff. But also, I'm one of those guys who never really liked Vic's father. I always see the guy as he's too holed up into his work and this and that, and he's ignoring this great kid. And, this issue kind of shed some light on the subject for me. And I'm actually changing my opinion of the dad, because we had earlier in the sequence where he's dealing with a nightmarish whatnot, where he's basically reliving his wife getting sick. And they always said how she died from cancer. Now, cancer, horrible thing to happen to people, but This one, you really see the cancer didn't just come from nature. The cancer came from the experiments. The cancer came from something that the dad did, with the lack of controls or whatnot, and so he got his wife sick. He killed his wife. A lot of times you have that survivor's, remorse and that survivor's guilt. Well, the dad definitely has that. And it was kind of interesting seeing him with that. You kind of start to understand some of the stuff he did in the past. You start to kind of understand why he got so focused on work, because he messed up. He killed his wife for all practical purposes in his mind. Now, did he actually? That's a whole nother debate. But in his mind, he truly believes he killed her. And I can kind of understand why he was so driven by his work. And I can understand Vic probably doesn't know the whole story behind his mother getting sick, because the dad's not going to tell him, hey, son, I messed up. I killed your mother. So it was a kind of a neat thing to seeing this side of the dad even throughout this, because we're dealing with the humanity of Vic Stone. Well, we're kind of starting to get the humanity of the dad and understanding where he comes from. And I think that is kind of a neat part of this story, that this part of this character, the dad, who I really did not like, I'm starting to like the guy and understand where he's coming from. And I'm starting to feel bad for him.
Well, and it's also the drive to save your son no matter what, but then looking at what did I do? Because now he's looking back, did I bring back my son, or did I bring back something else? And you can see now with some of his other experiments that have gone wrong,
yeah,
why he would feel that. Because now we're dealing with that, because he's been kidnapped and replaced by one of his experiments going wrong. I mean, so, when you start to see that, you can start to see some of his motivations and why maybe he's looking at Vic and going, did I create something? Did I bring back my son, or did I bring back something else? You can see why he would think that way. It added to the motivation of this. I agree with you. This is one of the better tellings of the dad. I think what it's done is it hasn't discounted anything that you would feel in the past about him, because I felt like you the same way. Now I'm starting to have some sympathies for the dad and kind of go, we didn't know the whole story. And I like that. I like when you add that other layer and kind of go, I'll probably always have issues with the father, but I get it. I think this issue starts to go with, he has always shied away from repeating the experiment that created Vic. It's been adamant. This case is closed. The clone, the one who's assumed his identity, the doppelganger, yeah, is embracing that. We've got this agent who got damaged on the field highly, and almost, to the level of being burned alive. Let's conduct the experiment again. Let's bring her back. Vic, the other scientists are unwittingly pulled into this, and it becomes a moral conundrum. It's, you want to save a life, right? But what are we doing to this person? And the experiment begins again. This is where the art shift happens. And this is a great example of where you can get away with an art shift when the story is this compelling, because the art shift was pretty drastic. I was like, whoa, what just happened here? Not a knock on the art. I'm pretty open-minded on my art. I love artwork. I would have been probably different if this was two different issues and just kind of like, oh, cool, they've got shifting art teams, very cool. When it happens in an issue, I'm not always a big fan of it. In this case, the story was so good, I just didn't care. And it was both offerings were really good art. It just, they were such different styles that my preference is usually, if something like this is going to happen, you would see that in two different books, not two different issues, not in the same issue. But aside from that, when we got back into the actual story and you start seeing the moral conundrum going on here, what do you do in that moment? You've been wrestling with your own humanity. Now you're going to put somebody else through that. Do you do it? Do you not? I could understand the wrestling with that and not being sure what's the right route to go. I can't wait to see who this variant is. It's not the exact same path that Vic went through, because if I remember correctly, one component had a slight difference to what Vic's did. So, go ahead.
The mother box for variant is damaged,
right?
And that was the thing. When he's saying he's trying to control it, he's like, the mother box is fighting me, warning me that we shouldn't be doing this. It's telling me it's damaged and missing vital code. So that for me is what is missing? What is going to happen? How is this going to, change her? And I think that it was something that was kind of cool, because you think back to when they showed the creation of Vic, it just jumped in and it bonded and everything kind of, for lack of a better term, went smoothly, as smoothly as it could go, but it's still bonded. we're now getting something completely different. And I think that's going to be, I'm hoping things turn out well for that agent, because she seemed kind of like they've used her in a couple issues. They kind of introduced her for this purpose. And, when they first were introducing her, it was one of those things, okay, why are they bringing her in? Who's she going to be? Now you see what the game plan for the character was. I'm like, okay, now, I hope they keep her around, because she seems like a decent person. But how much of the mother box is going to affect her? How much of this process is going to affect her? We saw what a healthy mother box did to Vic with his life and how it changed him. How is it going to change her? And I think that for me was a great way to kind of introduce this character and showing we're going to have some possible issues, and if they turn her to a darker, eviler version of Cyborg, we can kind of understand why, because the mother box is damaged. We're kind of explaining, laying down a groundwork and figuring out, okay, this may be where this is going to go. It's one of those things where we're at a nice swerve where it can go one of two different ways, and we're not exactly sure how this is going to go.
Right. And that's part of the fun of this, I think, is this story that I think has a lot of layers to it. I can't wait to see where it's going to go, how it's going to play out. I love the characters. I love that it's telling the kind of stories that only would match a character like Cyborg. And even stories that are more traditional are being told in a way that would only match this character. His interactions with the world are very unique and different. This is just really an entertaining title, and I'm just glad to be reading it right now.
Now going forward, do you know if who's going to be the creative team, the art team on this, or
I don't.
Have they? Okay, because that was the thing I was wondering about with this. Because like you, when the art change happened, I was like, whoa. What's that? But it's one of those things where the story was so good, I was okay with it.
Well, it's bi-weekly, though. It's a bi-weekly book.
Right.
So I think that's part of the challenge is you start, and I'm honestly a fan of this. So let me clarify, when I said that I actually enjoyed the story so much that I'm glad they did this, I wouldn't have wanted them to delay the issue because of this. So let me clarify that piece. I think we're going to see this sometimes in books because they got to keep them on time. I would prefer they do this to keep me moving forward with this great story than not. And I think that's what happened here. I'm sure this is a deadline issue. Please understand, I'm making a guess. But why else would you do this? You'd do it because of the fact that you want to keep this bi-weekly book on time. Cyborg, I'm hoping this book has a lot of momentum to it. I'm hoping people are checking it out that haven't previously, because it's a very cool book. And honestly, I want the continuing story. It's a serialized medium. I was happy with the art teams that were presenting. I thought the difference between the two art styles was a little jarring at first, but that quickly was overtaken by the great story that was being delivered. So it just, honestly, it all worked for me. So I'm fine. Keep going and doing this. It's working for me. I don't know the answer to your question on that as far as what the art teams look like for this book, but I prefer, as long as we've got solid art teams like we're on this, the on-time delivery, because I want more Vic. I want more of these characters. So the choice that they made I feel it was the right one.
Yeah, and we're in agreement on this. We're both on complete understanding on this. Whereas, like you, it's jarring, but the story is still good.
Yes.
So it didn't make me go, "Oh, this is terrible," and stop reading. I was fine with this story being told. Though it does have to be mentioned that it is a dramatic shift in the art style.
Yes, it is.
Shows the quality of the work, because this looks cool. I'm not saying one looks better than the other. This final page, one of the final pages when they're really merging the mother box and just everything that's going on, that looks like a really cool looking. That's a very beautiful page. So plus this great story that's being done, getting pumped out. So it's kind of weird that something like this would have really thrown me off, but it didn't, because of the story was going through. And it was kind of a good time that they did it, if you think about it.
Sure.
Because it was right as they're at the laboratory, right as everything's changing. It's the first change happens right when they really start getting into high gear about the creation of the female cyborg. So I think it kind of was a good timing that it is if we had one panel where it's Blue and Vic walking down the street, and then the next panel, if they had broken up the walking on the street panel with the two different art forms, I probably would have a different reaction than what I had. But because it is now we're in this lab sequence, now we have all this stuff going on where we have the art change, I'm 100% okay with it.
I totally agree with you. I think that's part of the key of this whole thing is timing. As far as if you can make whatever's the most natural break in the issue to do that kind of thing. I don't know. Comics are a serialized medium for me, and we've had the opportunity to talk to a number of just great artists on the show, and how deadlines are such a factor of what they do. That they've talked about how you have to be judicious. You have to know what pages you can spend more time on, which ones you can't. And when you've got a book that's now bi-weekly, you got to and you want to maintain those deadlines. Deadlines are pretty important to fans. I'm pretty patient with it, but like anybody else, my preference is if you can get the book to me and have it well done, that's my preference. This I look at as this is their solution to get the book to me and have it well done. They were two art teams that I like both of their art styles. The jarring part was only that they're two different sensibilities. Right. But here's the thing. They have strong sensibilities in both of them, so it worked for me. It just ended up being a really good thing. I think it would be disingenuous if we didn't mention the fact that was a part of our experience in reading this issue. That was a kick-butt issue. But it is something that was a factor in the whole thing, and it's well worth mentioning because of it. Great book. I really love the book. Oh, God, yeah. It's kind of like going from Metallica to Mozart. Yeah, that's a good comparison. Both are wonderful to listen to, but they are dramatically different. Yes, and you don't usually do that. Well, you don't usually do that. I do. You should see how my my music library goes from show tunes to Disturbed, one after another. I'm pretty sure you've done that on an episode of this show. So it's or maybe it's just that I'm disturbed. Wow. Good book.
Nothing like the handy-dandy electro claw for carving through metal doors.
I would like to remind everyone about our show voicemail line. It's 1-440-388-4434 or Dr. Norge on Skype. We love having you part of the show, so please feel free to call in about anything you want to talk about in and out of comics relating to DC. Jim, we are sponsored once again this episode by DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com. What's going on over at DCBService.com? Well, of course, they've got their continuing bundles supporting the Rebirth, 50% off, the miniseries, 50% off the different Rebirth titles, Vertigo, Young Animals, 50% off. But they also have these really cool Absolute Preacher hardcovers, Volume 1 and Volume 2, each one also 50% off, each one only $75. Over at InStockTrades.com, they are offering these amazing 70% off, up to 70% off. Actually, some books are up to 85% off. I just came by that book, Bayou. They have the trade paperback of that. It's a $14.99 trade paperback. It's 85% off, only $2.24. Bayou was a great story. That was part of that online initiative. Remember when they had that online platform that they were doing for a while for comic delivery? Bayou was one of them that was really sweet off of that. To get that trade paperback for $2.24, you are nuts if you don't pick that up if you haven't read it. It's a great read. So I encourage you to go there and check it out. $2.24 for a trade paperback? You just have to. So that's InStockTrades.com. Check them out. They got an amazing deal. They say it's up to 70% off, but it's actually more than that in some cases. I want to thank both of those sites for sponsoring our show. Speaking of our show, check out RagingBullets.com for updates on upcoming episodes, especially now that we're getting back onto a more frequent delivery of the podcast. You're going to want to check and see what's going on over at RagingBullets.com. It does feed Twitter and our Facebook page. Speaking of Facebook, we have a Facebook fan page, and it's something we share with InfiniteComics.com, but it's really so much so belonging to the community that's there. Jeremy and the whole crew over there, and I don't do them enough justice on this podcast. It's a hell of a hangout, and it really is due to the fact that the people over there are just great people. I love popping up there just to see what people are talking about. I usually find my news there first because people post links to things saying, hey, this is up. Did you see this trailer? What do you think about that? Let's do a talk back from last night's Supergirl show. And they'll do those type of things. It's really great to see the interactivity. So for those of you that are just looking for more interactivity with some of these things that you love, go check out the group over there. It really is just high quality people hanging out, talking comics when they want to, and everything related to. I'm proud to be a part of the group. It's really their group. We're just glad to have an association with it. You can also find us on Google. I have a PlayStation Network account. You're more than welcome to link to. Actually, I love linking to friends on that. It's all just about hanging out and sharing our mutual love for all of these great hobbies. Jim, our next episode, we're going to be coming back and talking some more comics, and following that up with the episode afterwards talking about the 4-part crossover between Supergirl, Flash, Arrow, and Legends of Tomorrow. So our next 2 weeks are pretty mapped out for ourselves, where we're going to be talking about some of our favorite recent comic book releases. We're also going to bring back the Speeding Bullet segment, where it gives us kind of a more open-ended chance to talk about things during the week that maybe you and I didn't plan to talk about, but one or both of us encountered that we're like, hey, I really like to talk about this. Relates to DC, relates to our comics, or relates to the hobby in general, and it's something worth shouting out on the podcast. So we're going to start bringing back that segment and making it more of a part of the show as we come back with some greater frequency. So we will definitely see you next week.
Bye!
On November 13th, Sean Whalen was asked to stop constantly talking about comic books. That request came from his wife. Deep down, he knew she was right, but he also knew that someday he would find someone that would talk to him. With nowhere else to go, he appeared at the home of his childhood friend Jim Segulin. Sometime earlier, Segulin's boss had requested that he shut up about his comic books and never speak of them again. Can two grown men put out a DC Comics podcast without driving each other crazy? It's Raging Bullets, the DC Comics fan podcast. With Sean Whalen as Dr. Norge, and Jim Segulin as the Sensei of the Whatnot and the Duke of You-Know. It's a spoiler podcast, so they will go in depth into the plot lines, story twists, and whatnot of the comics they are reviewing. So if you haven't read the books, you may want to come back later so you may better enjoy the show.